Town Council meeting. Today is Thursday, March. Today is the 6th, 2025. It's 5 p.m. I'm calling to order the Town Council meeting of the Town of Bowling Green. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. I'm going to take a roll call. Mr. Hageman,
Here.
Mr. Stork, Vice Mayor Coyle,
Here.
Dr. Chenault, not present, Mr. Webb,
Here. Mr.
Voigt,
Here.
Ms. Davis.
Here.
We have 6 council members present, 1 absent. We have a quorum. Items 1 through 3 on the consent agenda. Do any of the council members need any of these pulled out? Or just
Actually, it's not a question on the Planning Commission annual work plan. I'd like to make a request for an addition. Since you're going to be discussing the comp plan, I'd like to have an inclusion in regard to tiny homes. We have enough accessory dwelling in our last ordinance, but tiny homes seem to be making an impact.
Could I respond to that, Madam Mayor?
I recognize you, yeah.
Okay, all right. I don't see any problem with that at all. Very cool. We were discussing that a little bit over the last ordinance update that we did, so it would be good to elaborate further. Thanks.
Do you want to pull that one out? Or
No,
that's all you
You don't
need?
need to.
Okay. Go for it. May I have a motion to accept items 1 through 3 on the agenda, please?
So moved.
I have a motion from Commissioner Voigt and
So
second.
moved with the addition of giving the tiny homes to the Planning Commission.
thank you,
And I'll second it.
and a second by Mr. Hageman. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We will now move to public comment. Anyone wishing to speak, please come to the podium and state your name and address. You have 3 minutes to speak. You will address the chair, not the council persons, and our rules do not allow for us to respond to you. So as much as we'd like to, we can't, but we are listening and we are taking note. I will now open public comment. Going once. Going twice. I will now close public comment. We are moving on to member comments. Mr. Hageman, do you have any comments?
Just one comment. I had somebody come into the store the other day and don't like the idea that we started at 5 o'clock because they can't be here at 5. That's all I'm gonna say.
Okay. Mr. Stork,
I don't have anything.
Vice Mayor Coyle, Mr. Webb, Mr. Voigt.
Yeah, real quick, I'll just like in reference to planning again. It was a short meeting, the last one that we had at the PC, but we elected a new appointed a new chair with Ms. Scott Sigmund, Lisa's vice chair, and we had our we just appointed our new member, Ms. Lauren Gribsman, and she was there. She's very excited. It looks like it's going to be pretty good. We had some good discussion referring to that work plan, and we're gonna, if we approve that here tonight, which we did, the Planning Commission will get that, add that other thing to it, approve it our next one, and then get to work. So it'll be very
Thank
nice.
you.
And that's really all I got for right now.
Very good. Ms. Davis, very good. I would like to make a comment. I've noticed at meetings, sometimes we get a little overzealous, and sometimes there are commissioners who aren't as loud or as forceful. Would you please raise your hand if you have a question regarding an item on the agenda? And so that the chair can recognize you, that way we're not speaking over each other. Fair enough. We will now move on to item number 4. We have staff reports and presentations. Community Development Report, number 4. Mr. La Riviere?
That one moment, please. Just some highlights, collaborating with in Bowdoin, Stantec, and VDOT on several matters, including the sewer pipe on Main Street, which I will leave at that because we'll have some items later on the agenda. Still working with the Department of Health on getting the cross-connection compliance review going. Contacted the Hanover Caroline Water Board for some information on some past reviews that have happened in town. Waiting for that to come back. Working with a couple permit applicants, got 2 approved this month. Meeting with potential developers and putting in some inquiries to VDOT regarding their permitting authority in town streets, which has come up over a couple items, which also includes the sewer pipe on Main Street. Still waiting to hear back on most of that. But I'm here if you have any questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions from council?
Just quick, do we ever get a comment back from VDOT on that community parking lot? Does the town still own it?
Mr. Bates has not followed up on that yet, but
Got it.
we will follow back up with him
Alright.
once more.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any more questions? All right, moving on. We have the police department report. It's in your packet. Are there any questions for staff and council on that? Okay, moving on. Public Works Department monthly report. Hello.
Good afternoon, council and mayor. I'm presenting the January utility report. For January, the operations was pretty business as usual. There was some blowers installed in the wastewater or the lift stations at Heritage Pines, Maury Heights. It was cleaned out beforehand. Hayward was at the facility, and we were looking at some of the infrastructure and parts that are aged, just getting note of it, some information about the overall operation of the equipment. That went really well, and also provided some training on some UV, the new UV system that's there, just to show how that works. During January, the biological activity had increased, which was indicated by a little bit more wasting, a little bit more hauling. And when the bugs are more active, they produce more solids. So that's pretty normal. We were looking into the possibility of adding polymer to the digester to help dewatering on the sand drying beds. But we had also made a suggestion of getting a tiller for the sand, which will help break up the sand and help dewatering. we had a meeting, IES, Town of Bowling Green, Town Manager, India, had a CIP meeting, just talking about suggestions that could help with sludge disposal and just make everything a little bit more streamlined rather than waiting on the sand drying beds. And we performed pretty regular preventative maintenance on fluids, belts, and filters, primarily oil and belts and filters. All of the monthly samples were well within QL, some even less than. And overall, it was a really good month. And water, we had a, make sure I'm getting, apologize. I think that's it. Everything was pretty business as usual. Water system was, nothing out of the ordinary. And that's all I've got. Does anybody have any questions or?
I do. Last month we discussed the drying beds and the waste that were hauled off.
Yes.
And since we had gotten rid of the certain, thank you, I couldn't think of the name of it properly. Since we got rid of the filamentous, we had discussed trying to get that back with Caroline County to reduce the cost to the town. Are we moving forward in that? Is that come to fruition or?
Sure, I'll jump in. Yeah, so since that meeting, I've had a discussion with the county administrator. So one of the items that you have before you is a letter. So if you all give me the direction to go ahead and transmit that letter to the county, we'll formally request that. And then those discussions can continue to see if they're willing to reconsider accepting our sludge.
Has everyone looked at the papers in front of? Go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple. That should be pretty quick. All right, so items 3 and 4, the blowers installed to help with grease, and then the maintenance at the pump stations for grease. Is it getting worse?
The grease?
Yeah.
Like, do you mean like more frequently?
Well, just like the overall maintenance and like the cost, the manpower cost, the time, things wearing down.
In terms of infrastructure, or I'm sorry, I'm
Not
just,
just, but basically, that cost the taxpayer, I guess, is like the main thing I'm going for. It's with it over time.
I would say the cost is going up pretty much that's pretty standard, it's usually going to go up, hauling sludge, hauling any kind of septic is costing more just because of where it needs to go now. It can't just go anywhere, but the influent for there is coming to the wastewater plant, so that's should be pretty minimal charge. But the rates of what people are charging is going up, especially for septic hauling.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't even just mean in that, but like, as more grease gets into it, the systems malfunction. You have to go out there and clean them differently than otherwise just passing through. Is that having to be more frequent?
Well, so with the addition of blowers in the lift stations, that should be going down.
That should alleviate it.
Yeah, it should help. I don't want to say alleviate, but it should help.
Sure. All right. Okay. That's all on that one. All right. With the fire hydrant, that's those hit damaged. Do we have any idea like what that's gonna like cost our taxpayers? Like, is there much of a financial impact on that, or is that pretty minimal to repair? Do you have any clue on that? Like a ballpark?
I would have to get back to you on
Okay,
how much
yeah,
that would cost.
no biggie. I'm not
Yeah.
like,
Do we know who hit it?
I don't think that would be something I'd want to bring up in here.
Well, we don't have to mention names. The answer is yes or no. If we
Fine.
know who hit it, their insurance company should cover it.
Okay, and then all right, 2 more real quick ones. So yeah, regarding the filamentous, is that like same level it was last week we checked, like still down?
Oh,
or
yeah.
like on a line graph, is it just like
So filamentous isn't something that just comes and goes away. It's always present.
Right.
It is normal to have. However, when it overgrows, it causes the treatment issues. So really, like if we were to plot the settability on a graph, it has plummeted and now it's just staying pretty steady.
that's my question.
Yeah.
Great. And then the new UV, you said you're having some training on that. Is it really that different? Back
It's
forever ago when we appropriated for it, it was kind of like said it was like basically the same system we had. So just curious.
it's just good to have the manufacturer. It's no additional cost to anybody, because they are the ones that installed it. They'll come out as many times
Oh,
as you
sure.
want.
So it's more like a CD.
Yeah, just
Okay.
kind of come out, show the guys how it works, what to expect. It's always good to get a little refresher.
Sure, sure. Okay. No, thanks. That's everything. I appreciate it. Thanks, James.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Anything else from council? Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We will move on to item number 7 on the agenda, the town manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Just to add a bit on one of the items from Public Works, I mentioned to you all that we did have a fence that a tree had fallen on, and so we've been working with Flatiron, who will be repairing that, and I worked with Versa to file that claim, so we did receive about $800 back on that repair. Moving on to my items. Under financial management, we obviously received the FY22 audit from Robertson Farmer Cox and Associates last week. So I'd like to thank the folks on the team who helped assist with that. It was a very lengthy and arduous process, but we're happy to get across the line with that. One of the items you have before you tonight is an engagement letter that I received from Robertson Farmer Cox at about 2:30 today. So I'm requesting to kind of walk that on so I can get approval and authorization to go ahead and sign that so we can start the 23 process and keep the ball rolling. Under infrastructure and utilities, all of the lights that were requested to be repaired earlier in the year have been repaired. So thanks to Public Works and the chief of police from the police department for coordinating on that. There have been 6 new lights that have been submitted that are either flickering or out. And I've submitted those at the end of February so we can kind of keep that ongoing. Met with VDH to discuss potential revisions to our consent order timelines to better align with future outcomes from our VDH grant project on the hydrological source evaluation that we're working with Stantec on. We've continued optimization of the USDA project scope and budget in collaboration with Steve Ball from Webb and Associates, as well as Davenport staff. As far as intergovernmental relations goes, I attended the DEQ regional water supply meeting with both Carolina and King George counties at the invitation of DEQ. I submitted VDOT scoping responses with input from the mayor and vice mayor. Finalized that Versa settlement that I mentioned. We've coordinated on winter storm prep through the month of February with all the snow that we had. Posted special notices for special meetings, and then provided you all with a link to the Fort Walker NEPA study on behalf of Fort Walker. I haven't received any comments to transmit back to Fort Walker, but if you have any, please let me know. Continued with the recruitment for our finance director position, and I think that about sums it up. Continuing with FY26 budget prep, as well as we finally received our draft website. So once we get the final edits on that, we'll be launching that within the coming weeks. So a lot of progress, a lot of work. So at this point, some of the items that I've given you today, the request for the letter, as well as the engagement letter, I would appreciate motions and authorizations to go ahead and proceed with transmitting the letter for the reconsideration for the sludge to the county administrator and the county board on behalf of council, and then engagement for the FY23 audit letter, which will be the FY23 audit process in the amount of $30,000, which is the same as the last.
Are there any questions from council?
Okay.
Mr. White?
I just wanted to, definitely just bring up to thank staff for, they did work hard on that audit, and I just want to acknowledge that. And also an extra thanks for getting those lights and everything done. Like, that was kind of a long lingering project, but it's good to see that one get some fruition, and I'm looking forward to the new website.
Great.
But with that, I would make a motion to submit the letter for the reconsideration of the sludge hauling.
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion from Councilman Voigt. I have a second from Councilman Hageman. Is there any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries unanimously. Was there something else you said? we need to-
The audit, the audit
Yeah,
engagement
thank you.
letter for FY23, we both will have to sign that after.
You
so
need a, do
do
you
it-
need a motion for that?
I need a motion
I
for
make
that.
a motion that we reengage Robinson, Farmer and Cox.
And I'll second it.
So I have a motion from
And authorize $30,000 from our audit,
To
amendment.
authorize
audit one.
$30,000 for this is the 23?
FY23 audit, yeah.
FY23 audit.
So I have a motion from Councilman Stork and a
Second. I still second
Second.
it. Yep.
second from Councilman Hageman. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hands. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And one last item that was not on here. I've been in contact with the company that leases the post office, and he mentioned that they are going to be sending some information back to the county. Essentially, they had a contractor that is from out of state. And they had to go through some licensing and additional testing, but they believe that there are some federal regulations that may absolve them from having to do additional permitting processes. So I believe they'll be in contact with the county to try to expedite that process. But I work with both Mr. Castle from the company as well as the senators and the postmaster to ensure that we're trying to get our post office back open and operational as quickly as possible, as it also presents operational impacts to the town as we're having to send our public work staff to go pick up the mail just like everyone else in Milford. So we are also feel your pain and working to get that done quickly. So thank you all.
Thank you so much. I'm sure the citizens appreciate that update.
I don't know if everybody's aware, but they did deliver a pallet of bricks to fix the wall. That's the first time I've seen bricks there in 3 months.
Okay, let's move on to item number 8, the utility report. Is,
So Jamie just gave that. So I
yeah,
think we'll go to, go on to
Jamie,
9.
I would make one suggestion. Your cover sheet, can you change the date on it? You have last year's date. Thank you.
I have a question. Jamie, how is our gross alpha levels? Have we tested recently? Have they gone down? Have they gone higher?
Just sent that data. I don't have it right in front of me right now. I think it's good
Okay.
from what I remember.
Some of the wells have gone down,
Yeah.
some are still exceed the state limit. So
Okay, sorry, I apologize.
Any other questions? Go for it. You can go sit down. We're gonna move on to item number 9, and that will be, I'm gonna turn this over to the town manager. This is discussion about the Main Street sewer line.
thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll bring up John Simmons from Bowdoin Environmental Services. And we'll tag team this. John will give the background, and then JC will discuss the procurement, and I'll talk a little bit about the financing, and then we'll go from there.
All right. Well, good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the council. For those of you who've never met me, I am John Simmons, the COO within Bowdoin Environmental Services. And actually, if I could, I would like to back up a little bit and answer one of your questions, if that's okay. You know, talking about the increase with cost and things with grease coming into the wastewater plant. It absolutely does increase your costs and operations. It doesn't necessarily, you don't see it at the town, but I do see it, you know, in my office, because what happens is it involves more testing, more corrections at the wastewater plant, more of my involvement, more of Jamie's involvement. So we have labor costs that are increased because of that. You know, you've heard the spills about the FOG programs before. We do intend to come before the council in the next couple, you know, months to talk about a FOG program for the town, because it's very much needed here. It costs you chemicals and things that you have to treat the lift stations with. You've had to add treatment to your lift stations already to try to treat the fats, oil, and grease before it gets to the wastewater plant. So you've already seen that cost increase. So, you know, across the board, it absolutely affects treatment. It affects your risk with staying in compliance. So what we need to do is try to prevent it from ever even going into the drain or coming to the wastewater plant. You can't stop all of it, but, you know, through community awareness and things like that, we can definitely minimize it. So unless there's any other questions, I'll proceed with the issue on Main Street. So February 24th, we got a call that there were some people experiencing not overflows, but backups and things in lower standing basements. I think maybe even your 911 dispatch office was having an issue. So India obviously brought us involved to consult, with the issue to figure out what was going on. We then brought in a contractor to do CCTV work. They stuck a camera into the line to see what the issues were. They found that the line, being that it was installed in the 40s, it's quite old, it's deteriorated, and what they found is a total collapse of this line, which makes it unrepairable with any other means other than replacement. So where we are now is you have no choice but to replace that line. Our current need right now is you're currently doing pump and haul. What that means is you have a sludge truck coming in here 4 times a day, pumping the sewer out of the line, taking it to the wastewater plant. That's quite expensive. That's going to cost you sometime around $16,000 a month, I'd say, if not more. There's a lot of risk involved in that. When it rains, you got a lot of I-9 out of town. That's going to make a lot more water go to that sewer. It's going to elevate the risk of raw sewage going onto the ground, and we can't let that happen. So what we're proposing is to do a bypass pump to where you put in a above ground pump temporarily that will manage and monitor the level of that sewage. It'll pump it around to another manhole so it doesn't have to rely on a pump truck or someone to decide when to pump that line. To do the initial install of the pump and the first week's rental, you're looking at $17,500 to do that work. And then after that, it's going to be $7,800 per week to rent that equipment and keep it going. Keep in mind, you're already going to pay $16,000 if you stay on the pump and haul. So the risk is lower. It is quite expensive, but at this point, it's something you really need to do. It reduces the smell, and we're also going to do that in a way that it's going to minimize the impact on the businesses downtown. That was very important to India, that we find a way to, run it in a way that it would not affect that. So Stantec Engineering is coming in. They're going to engineer the bypass. They're also looking at engineering the replacement of the sewer line. So what we really need from the council tonight is the approval to go ahead and do the bypass, to initiate the bypass pump, and then also to put out invitation for bid to get bids to actually do the repair for the sewer line once the engineering is complete. Right now, I would say the situation is quite critical, and something needs to be done to prevent raw sewage from actually getting in the ground and affecting the health. So does anyone have any questions or I guess more comments from India or JC?
When they do the bypass, you're saying from one manhole to another, do you know what the other manhole will be? Will it take up parking space in town or downtown, or how is that gonna work?
So we're currently, as he mentioned, we're currently working with Stantec, who will have to engineer that plan, and then VDOT will have to approve it. We are trying to work very intentionally to eliminate, mitigate the impacts as much as possible, but there will probably be some impacts to parking on Main Street. So at that,
How big of a line is it gonna be in diameter?
When the engineering's complete, it'll nail that down, but you're probably looking at anywhere from 2 to a 4-inch line because it's going to be under pressure at that point. But I would say maybe a 4, and then they'll run it right up the curb unless they found another option, because India made it pretty clear that she wanted to do it, as minimal impact to parking and the business as possible. So we're still waiting to see what they come back with to see what the best way they found to run it, but it's really not going to be that big of a line.
Thank you.
Mr. Roy?
How do we feel about the integrity of the destination line?
The line that they would be hooking back into.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all going to eventually need attention. But what you could do there is once we continue the camera work, there's been discussions about adding a certain amount of money to the fund every year to where you can do some camera work every year. And if you were to camera it and catch it before it collapses, at that time it may be where you can go in and reline the line instead of replace it. So you really need to camera as much of the town as possible, make a plan, decide how you're going to address the other failures before they become critical to this point. Sure.
Mr. Webb?
Well, I thought we're gonna be tying on to Milford Street somewhere.
I would have to look at the map. I'm not as familiar with the layout of the streets as
I
everyone
think
else.
all that's new, so I don't think we have a concern there.
I do know that there's been discussion about a lot of the lines around the area being newer, and this just happens to be one that has not been replaced.
Just, my only question, you know, I guess Stantec will look at this, but is there an opportunity to just repair the one area that we have the failure and then slip line the rest of it?
No, because really they found other areas that were issues as well. You know, they found a hole in it that was about 10 inches big in one area, and really what's causing the emergency is the collapse. You know, but they found several places in there that would make it to where it's not lineable. And you know, it's best to now just address it. You know, you got to think about the fact it's 14 foot deep. So you don't really want to dig down 14 feet to do a spot repair and come back, you know, another year or two to have to fix it again.
Well, my only concern is you're going to be 14 feet deep, running right next to all the buildings, sidewalk, curb, light, utilities. You know, if there's any way possible to do a spot repair, I would think that would be most advantageous, and then try to slip line. But I'm sure Stantec will look at that. But I just wanted to voice my thoughts on that, and I think it's something that should be given special consideration.
As the engineer on council, I'll ask Stantec to consider your recommendation there, and we'll bring back both recommendations, and we'll provide staff's recommendation still, which is, I think, to replace it all. But we also know that there will be cost considerations, which we've been discussing at length with Davenport. So we'll bring those back for consideration.
Other questions?
I did stop on Main Street the other day. Drainfield Solutions was out pumping, and the gentleman was kind enough to show me what he was doing and told me again 4 times a day, and that each pumping was taking out 4,000 gallons.
Correct.
So anyhow, just thought I'd share that with the citizens.
Yeah, and that's 4 times a day that they're scheduled right now.
Yes. Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Well,
Thank you.
How did
Oh,
we
I'm
do
sorry,
with-
Mr.
That's
Hagan.
right. How did we do with the rain last night?
You know, I haven't checked with the hauler. Does anybody know that whether they hauled extra loads or not?
They have been hauling on average 6 a day.
Yeah,
And
so
so
that's
the
already too
emergency
low.
is 550 a load, and the regular pickup is three, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is becoming an incredibly costly endeavor. So we're talking about $16,000 a
Right.
week.
I mean, you being an
that-
engineer, you know that pump and haul is the most expensive option under most circumstances, and this is really not
Mhm.
what you want to keep doing.
And then in
Yeah.
addition, you know, we are hauling it to our plant, which in turn, we're still pumping and hauling from there somewhere else. So in some ways, we're
Correct.
doubling up on the pumping and hauling, which is not cost effective. But to the point, and I'll hand it over to JC to discuss the procurement piece as it relates to the IFB that we'll have to do. But we will need some clarification on the amount. We've recommended that Stantec take a look at repairing the whole line based on what they've seen. So we will need direction from council if you all want the whole line or part of the line. But staff's recommendation, as well as our team from IES, is for the full repair and to go to engineer for the full repair. So, but we will need clarification from that after he discusses the IFB process.
Well, so from the manhole that they're pumping from down to Milford Street, somewhere in there is where the collapse is, and it's that old concrete pipe.
Yes, and that's, you know, like I was saying earlier, it's a collapse in there, and there's several other areas that they found. And what we'll do is once they get the CCTV footage put together and get the notes and things added to it, we'll provide that to the town, you know, for review.
So the vintage, how old is that pipe? 40?
1940s is what we think it was.
Okay, so then from that manhole where they're pumping from coming back this way is the same age pipe?
I believe it is, yes. I think the newer pipe would be on past that area going the other way.
Right. So can you line and sleeve old concrete pipe?
Yes,
You can.
yes. What you would want to do is go in and clean it out, camera it, and that's how you determine whether you can line it, what your next course of action would be. But if you have a 10-inch hole in the side of it, a whole wall has gone out of it, you can't line that.
Right.
You know, if you have like leaking cracks and things in there and seams that have come apart, obviously you can line it. But when you have a full collapse or actual
Sure.
holes in it, that makes it difficult for the liner to take place.
But for the rest of the old 1940s concrete pipe, is it smart to budget and camera that thing and
Absolutely.
and sleeve, as we have money?
Yeah, and you know, with a town this size, I would look at maybe setting aside at least $20,000 a year for camera work. And that way you can get ahead of it, camera certain sections that you know are older. That way you can develop a plan on how you would go ahead and fix that. You know, the lining's great technology, and that's the way that you want to be able to line your pipes instead of doing replacement. But there's lots of options. But, you know, I would definitely set aside some money to camera every year and
Yeah.
even do smoke testing.
Yeah, that just makes a tremendous amount of sense
Yeah.
to me.
You know, that's the only way to stay out of being in a predicament you're in right now. You know.
And Councilmember Stork and I think Ms. Webb, just to kind of define where the most critical area is right at the manhole, kind of in front of the DK Firearms, right up to the hair salon. I think it's Megan Beasley's, Burke and
Yes.
Burke Insurance. So that's where the other manhole, that's the most critical section. But as he mentioned, the concern was about the connection to the rest of it and the integrity of the pipe there as well. So
Right. And you're also dealing with old brick manholes and things that, you know, it'd be nice when you're doing a pipe replacement just to get rid of those manholes and put, you know, better manholes or new manholes in there. But brick, it's just going to keep taking in infiltration. You know, it's really hard to stop that. They can do rehab on brick manholes, but in my experience, it doesn't really last that long.
They are a work of art though, when you
Oh,
look down
absolutely.
inside. of
You have to
them.
respect it for what it is. Yeah.
So, thank you, Mr. Simmons.
You're welcome. Thank
You
you.
have a lovely day.
Madam Mayor, if I
Yes.
may. Just from a procurement perspective, what we're requesting of council tonight is twofold. One is to approve the award of the contract to Stemmel for the bypass pump on an emergency basis. And the second is to authorize the town manager to execute a contract with whoever the selected vendor would be after the completion of the invitation for bid process. And the invitation for bid is the procurement mechanism being proposed by staff because that is the one that provides us the most cost control. Essentially, the lowest bidder who is both responsive and responsible, which basically means they followed all the rules in the application and are qualified to do the job, gets selected. So if the plan was to be altered from the staff recommendation and Bowden's recommendation, which is just to replace the entire area, that would slow us down in terms of being able to get this out for bid. Staff was looking at the proposal that we could give to council that would solve it in the quickest way and the most cost-effective way. So that's what's before you tonight. So again, two requests: emergency procurement for the bypass pump and approval for the award of the contract after the IFB process. Thank you.
and I think just to refine one point he mentioned, we have already planned to work with Stantec to engineer the full 520 feet that needs to be repaired. But if your direction is to repair the critical portion, I think we just also have to highlight that in the event that they get in there and start the work and then they cannot, you know, if it ends up that the integrity of the line further down is so bad, then there may be a change order to repair the whole thing. So if that's just part of the consideration.
Mr. LaRiviere, when you open this up for bids, the invitations for bids, and you look at the bids, do you level the bids so that, because sometimes necessarily the lowest bid is not necessarily the best bang for your buck because you're not getting the same. So are you leveling the bids so that they're all bidding for the same thing, the same pipe, the same?
So what Stantec is working on developing for us right now are called construction intent documents, and that's where they outline exactly what the bid is supposed to be. So
Okay.
when the bids come in, they are bidding on the exact same thing. There's no variation, and that's why it takes some time to do the engineering. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Pigman?
The 520 feet, is that from the gun shop down to Milford Street?
Yes, it's from the gum shop right to the intersection. Yes.
Do we know the condition from the gun shop back up to where we did the big repair last summer?
Don't believe we do. No. They did
Is
not.
there any problems
They did
in
not.
that area?
They did not CCTV that section, as they were intended to come and CCTV the section that they did. So.
I mean,
Mr. Roy?
we can knock out the first one real quick. You know, I'd like to make a motion to, how to word this, to approve the, can you word that for me again?
The motion could be something like, I move that the council vote to award the contract to Stemmel Plumbing on an emergency basis for the bypass pump operations.
So moved. See.
I, I have a motion. Is there a second? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Ms. Davis seconded. Or is there any further discussion?
Can I ask a question? Do we know? Do we have any kind of ballpark ETA of how quickly we can get that in place?
That depends on how quickly the traffic engineering plan can be done by Stantec and then the VDOT permit.
But after that, the mobilization would be within 72 hours.
Any other discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Now, I need a motion to allow our town manager to be able to procure a company when they go through the bid process.
May I ask a question before?
Certainly.
Do we have an anticipated guess as to how much it would be and where we're going to pull this money from?
No on the first part. The second part, we're working with Davenport to still try to refine that, but more than likely it would have to be our reserves.
Any other questions? Does anyone like to make a motion? No?
Fine. I mean, all right. I'll make a motion to move forward with the
Procurement.
initiation. Invitation for your mic's not on. I'm sorry. Invitation for bid. Yes, move forward with the invitation for bid as presented.
Do you want to add to that
And to authorize staff to execute the procurement.
And to authorize
sign the
staff to
contract.
execute the procurement. There we go.
I'll second it.
So I have a motion from Councilman Voigt, a second from Councilman Hageman. Any further discussion? Yes, Mr. Webb.
So just to be clear, we're saying we're going to authorize the procurement, and then once those bids come back in, we're not going to vote on that amount again. Staff's just going to sign and roll. But we're not sure what that figure, like a budget number, do we have any idea what that budget number is?
I do not at this time.
Okay.
But I will notify you. Well, I will notify you all as soon as I get the bid.
Mr. Hageman, do you have a question?
No.
Oh, your
And
mic's on. I didn't know.
And so
Mr. Webb.
what happens if it's more than our reserves? Then I guess you'll come back. Okay.
Yeah, she won't sign it.
So
Yes, Mr. Sword.
only comment I'll have is, and I get it. I mean, when you dig down and you got to go back to something solid. If you're just going to repair it, you got to go down and hope you come back to something solid to clamp onto.
Mm-hmm.
But really, if we do this, and I don't know how much the cameras are, but I really think we need to be proactive and not be caught like this again. We need to sleeve camera and sleeve everything that's 1940s, and
I agree.
I mean, because we're being very reactionary here, and when a accident happens or
Yes,
we have to be reactionary, but it's going to be
we
a lot
need to
of,
be proactive.
absolutely, and that's
Exactly.
we take a lot of flack a lot of time because everyone knows we have old stuff in the ground. So I really, to learn about this sleeving and to learn about the camera thing, I think the smartest thing we could do is right after we chew this pill and swallow it, we need to set up a schedule of looking at everything we've got and doing what we have to do.
I would like, go ahead, Miss India.
Yeah, that's something that will be coming forward in the CIP.
I would like to ask the town manager, is that something when you're working on our budget process, is that something that we can put in our budget so that we have this fund for this, to be proactive for this?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the intention would be to start adding that in the CIP process or operating at this point. I'll work with Davenport and our utility contractors to get their thoughts on the best approach, but it'll be one or the other.
Is one of the approaches that we may have to raise our sewer rates?
That would probably be something that we would have to look at. Yeah, and I think that'll be part of the conversation later as well.
Okay.
I have one more question.
Yes,
Just,
Mr. Webb.
you know, a little more technical in nature, you know, but if we do go through and we have to replace and we're digging down, we're going right down Main Street. You know, is there, I mean, has there been any discussion whether there will be a chance that any of the curb and gutter and sidewalk will be removed? And if so, you know, like, I just, you know, I was thinking ahead, if any of that does occur, you know, what are we replacing with? We're replacing with just what's there? Because I know we had issues with the, you know, the exposed aggregate when it was put down. I don't know, I mean, should there be any consideration to us replacing things differently, or I don't know, just a thought. I don't know if it's going to impact those things or not,
Yeah.
and just kind of curious. Something we may want to think about.
Right, that's a great point. In our discussions based on the emergency, we haven't given much thought to improvements, but I think as we think about the future USDA water line project that will be in the same areas, because initially that portion of the street was not included. I happened to catch that when I was looking at the plans with Mr. Ball and your staff, that we can look at potential improvements to that area at that time if need be.
Mr. Hagman.
Jamie, you might be able to answer this better than anybody else, or not. Somebody here, Dan, you might be able to answer it. But when they're coming down Main Street, and say, for instance, there's 200 feet that can be sleeved, but our sewer from our store on Main Street, you know where my store's at, it comes down that alley and ties in. So when you sleeve it, do you have to break into the ground and dig down so you can cut that sleeve to put that in? So every business would have to be cut in, basically. So at that point, we got the expense. Why don't we just replace the sewer line?
You know, I thought a lot of times they go in with the machine and you can see where that lateral is and you can cut it out.
That's what
You
I
know,
don't
you
know.
don't
That's
you
what I
don't
was
necessarily
asking,
have
yeah.
to dig down, but
All right.
I'm just saying that those are some things maybe we ought to start thinking about collectively. You know, if we do have to replace it, what are we replacing with? How will that look? I just know we had issues in the past, and
I think we also need to keep in mind that just because this section is being replaced, what it is being connected to may not hold up. So you could find yourself with additional replacement having to come up. And I know that this has happened in other areas. So I just want to put that out there in the universe to keep it on your radar. Miss India.
Yeah, I would also add that, I think previously in some other localities I worked in, particularly when you're in areas that's the county seat, that there are opportunities for cost sharing, as some of the reasons that we're having to pump and haul particularly is because we are ensuring that the 911 operations and the continuity of operations aren't interrupted. So I think there may be some opportunities for conversations in the future with our partners at the county about maybe sharing in some of the burden of these costs, as it supports all of our facilities and our residents that are both town and county residents.
Thank you. Mr. Voigt?
Yeah, one more. Okay, going off of what you said, Dan, about this could eat up the entire reserves. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page. When we had the incident up at the north side of town, we didn't just have like an automatic approval. We sent out the RFP thing, and then we had a special meeting to discuss the finances. Like that is a way that we could do this one too if we wanted to. Like, I don't want to hold anything up. This needs to get done. I mean, it just needs to get done. But if we have those fears of how we're going to pay for it,
Are you changing your motion?
no, I'm just asking.
Well, I was going to say there's a motion on the
Right,
table.
I made it.
You can withdraw it or change it, but
well, I mean, my only thought there, I have faith in staff to make the decision. I was just kind of voicing that thought that we just I think they're going to make the right decision when things come in. I wasn't saying that we have to have a special meeting, but I'm just curious to how much it is and what do we do, and just just thinking out loud, really. So I'd rather not have a meeting. I'd like me personally, I'd rather have staff just handle it and take care of it and go through the procurement process.
Yeah, I'd be happy. I mean, if you want a special meeting, be happy to bring back Stan Tech so they can walk through what it looks like, the anticipated, time frame, because there will be traffic impacts and all of those things that we'll have to work through. But we are very thin staffed at this point. But we can bring that back. And I think to your point as well, the last time I believe this happened, you were utilizing ARPA dollars.
Yes.
So the burden to
Those are gone.
the town, it was a bit different. It was other people's money. This time it is on us. So I think future planning and understanding that ARPA money is no longer around and there's no longer a federal safety net to save for some of these maintenance costs that have been absorbed over time. So
I was just putting everything on the table.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, we have a motion on the table to allow staff to put out an invitation for bids and for staff to procure the winner of that bid. All in favor, raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. All right. Let's move on to unfinished business. Do we have any to anyone's knowledge? Okay, moving on to new business. Item number 10 on the agenda, the ordinance to amend the BZA membership. We have our Director of Community Development and Partnership, Mr. LaRiviere.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council. This was an item that Council directed staff to execute at the February meeting, and it was to reduce the requirement in the town code, which stated that there had to be 5 or 7 members of the BZA, whereas state code only requires 3 members for municipalities of our size. So you have that explanation in the memo, and you have the draft memo from our town attorney, the draft code, or the ordinance itself, which shows the changes. And I'm here if you have any questions. Thank you.
I just have one on item B. Term of at least one member shall expire each year. How do you determine who that member is? Well, it's a valid question.
Oh, because the first person would have to start one,
mean,
2, 3. Yeah,
How
that
do you
makes
determine?
sense.
Is
I
it
think
the last
that
person who came on to BZA or?
I believe the intent was when they were first starting it up, they wanted the terms to be staggered, but they realized they couldn't do that unless they made that little rule. But I think that was just for the original appointments.
Gotcha. So should we change that or?
Mr. Attorney?
Yeah, that's a vestige of the old, when we
Language.
had 5 to 7
Okay.
members. Good catch, Vice Mayor. So we can make that clean up so that it aligns with the new membership. So you could adopt it with that
Okay. Cool.
amendment. Good catch.
Eeny, meeny.
Yeah.
Any other questions? So, I guess we would like to ask for motion, but doesn't have to be amended. Because of what you just said.
As amended, as with the amendment as discussed. Yes. So it'd be a motion to approve the ordinance with the amendment related to subsection B as discussed, and then we'll fix that. It just has to align with you can't have 5 years, doesn't make sense with 3 people.
Yes. All right.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion to adopt resolution 25-01 to reduce the required number of BZA members to 3 with the correction that we just discussed.
I have a motion from Councilman Stork. Do I have a second from Councilman Voigt? Any more discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. We will now move on to the financial analysis presentation. And I'm sorry, what? Oh, I'm sorry, I put a check next to it. Number 11, the budget process discussion. Would like to turn this over to the town manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So at our last meeting, I mentioned that I had a draft budget calendar, but with the changes in our finance director and treasurer position, been working to modify that. We now have an interim finance director. I'll be meeting with her next week to finalize it, and I'll get a final calendar for you. But essentially, in December, capital requests were sent to myself. We've reviewed those in January, along with capital meetings, as Mr. Simmons from Emboden mentioned, our engineers and our contractors. Officially in February, the operating budget development process started. We've been working with Mr. Taylor from Davenport on the financial analysis, as well as the audit work that was underway, and then started officially the budget development this week. We will send you budget estimates as required by state code by April 1st. About the April meeting, we will have the CIP budget presented, and then after that, I will give you more specific details as it relates to when I'll request a public hearing, and then the official proposed budget presentation at some point in May. But until I get some more time with our interim finance director, I can't commit to a specific date in May, and I may end up requesting a special meeting to do so that we can ensure that we have something adopted, hopefully by our regular meeting in June. So that concludes the discussion.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Okay, now we can move on to the financial analysis presentation from RT Taylor from Davenport and Company.
That's fine. You're good. Thank you very much. Get that so I don't knock into it so much. Let me turn. Better? Can y'all hear me okay? All right. We'll wait till that gets lit up. In the meantime, I'll introduce myself. I'm RT Taylor. I'm with Davenport and Company. We work as financial advisor to the town. We have been coordinating with town staff over the past several months since y'all contracted with us to provide, first and foremost, there was the comprehensive financial review. And at the time, obviously, we only had audited financials up through 21. We presented that at the January meeting. And we have since, I guess last week, we got the draft 22 audit. So we've incorporated the 22 financials into our analytical models. You'll see some of that updated for the purposes of the trend analysis. We have purposely streamlined this particular presentation and analysis to provide you an order of magnitude. As a reminder, and as y'all know, and let me go ahead, I'll go ahead, the page numbers, if you're following along in the book, are at the bottom right-hand corner. And I've just sort of jumped ahead and went through this first page here, page 2, or page 1, excuse me. So we started working with y'all in the summer of 24. We presented the comprehensive financial review, at least up through 21, back in January. It was based on audited information. We now have available the 22 draft audit that we've incorporated. And so we've updated our detailed comprehensive financial review, but this tonight, that was my point I was working toward. This is a streamlined presentation. It's to provide y'all an order of magnitude so you have some key considerations going into your budget adoption process. Trying to give you, at least based on 22 and what we have in the unaudited format from your trial balance that we've coordinated with staff on, a good, at least big picture of how your financial wherewithal looks right now, okay? So let me throw out the big caveat in this at first. We don't have audits for 23. We don't have audits for 24. We can guess at how 25 is tracking, basically. So we don't have a lot of what we would typically have in the way to be able to make a solid recommendation or two or more here tonight.
But what we are going to give you is for food for thought to incorporate in the upcoming budget process to get started. And I think what you'll see is that we're not trying to bite off everything at one time, because we do hope to have more current financial results before developing a very detailed and strategic plan to be able to implement it beyond 26. Okay, so that's my pitch or caveat on the front end, is keep in mind we don't have a lot of the solid financial information to work from yet. Okay, so we expect to get those, and India can correct me if I'm wrong, the 23 audit, since y'all took action tonight to get that process going, that should take about, what, 6 months? Hopefully less than 6 months, but over the next 12 months, is it fair to say we'd have 23 and 24? Sure. Okay. I'm really confident now. All right. So moving to page 2, Davenport has been tasked to provide, call it additional assistance, to be able to provide y'all this information in conjunction with your 26 budget. Again, based on unaudited information, we've developed some observations and recommendations so that you can have a good order of magnitude of numbers to go into your 26 budget process. I won't hit the yellow box again because I just spoke on that up front. Page 3, we have also been assisting the town with the following challenges: coordinating with federal and state funding programs for various projects related to the water and sewer funds, identifying funding options for priority projects, which we'll get into, but that's basically what we're qualifying there, is the water systems gross alpha issue, which is under consent order by the Virginia Department of Health, and as well as the recent sewer system infrastructure failure. Maintaining the approval package from USDA pertaining to long overdue water fund projects. That's the package y'all submitted. It's been 5.5 years now. Y'all submitted it back in August of 2019, or at least it was approved by 2019 by USDA. We eclipsed their 5-year expiration deadline back in August of 24. Okay, so 5 years went, and it was basically going to evaporate. We huddled up with India and the then state director for the USDA program and said, okay, what can we do here? We have about $1.5 million in grant monies tied to that package. We took out an interim financing note in anticipation of doing those projects back then. And so that actually matures next month, April. However, there was an amendment done on that interim note that allows us to extend that final maturity to next April, April 2026. Okay, so we're working with CoBank, who's the interim note provider, to get an extension. So we're working with these programs, working with our financiers to try to extend our timeline here, because under that original PER, in that approval from USDA, y'all were capped at $7.265 million. Well, that was 5 years ago. Okay, cost escalation being what it has been, especially from the pandemic, et cetera. Those projects now, if you went to do those alone, would be 11, 12 million, is our understanding. So that original PER is being rescoped, rescaled, et cetera, and we would hope that we can fit it within that original approval package. And the reason why that's important, and I know y'all been watching the news or at least hearing about it, at the federal level, things have been sort of put on hold, right? However, USDA staff has told us things that have been in process ahead of the change in administration, they still should have the green light on everything. So as long as we don't do anything in the meantime to upset the apple cart under the original package, even though we're allowed to scale it back, that's no problem. The problem is if we do anything that triggers their need to do a re-evaluation of call it their credit analysis, their underwriting process, something as simple as that could trigger, call it to refresh the package. But by virtue of doing these extensions every 3 months with our key contact at the federal level. She's been extremely helpful and patient in walking through and keeping us posted and checking in. The communication has been very good. And they've been very amenable to helping us to keep those monies in play. I guess my point is, all that's being done related to the older projects, which based on our current gross alpha issue and the sewer line breaking, those aren't really a priority. I mean, that's going to be a big, call it commitment from a cash flow resources on the town. So that's one. And then the other two, bringing those on at some point sooner rather than later, because those are the two priority projects, the gross alpha and the sewer line. That's going to be another big commitment. And I think our estimates right now that you're going to see in here in a minute are substantial, okay? And I'm hearing other things that y'all are going through and doing tonight. So this is trying to give you the perspective that things have been deferred for quite some time, and we've got to take some type of action, whatever it is. It's y'all are the governing body to figure this out. We will, of course, bring back detailed analyses to show where the potential triggers are or levers are that we can pull to get things done. But with that said, we've been working diligently for I'll call them, those are our three big projects that we're trying to figure out how to do it. We originally tried to have the conversation with USDA about maybe folding in the gross alpha and consent order projects into the original USDA. It's just not going to work. Both are so expensive. We cannot do we wouldn't be able to do any of those old projects under the old scope. It would be scaled back to zero in order to fit the consent order project in. And if we did that much, call it amending of the old package, that again, that's another variable that would upset the apple cart on that old package. But we have some other options available to us that we're working through, and we'll come back to you when we have more clarity on things. So I probably overdone it there, but let me, I'll continue now. So I just spoke about the interim note, so y'all are abreast of how that's going, and CoBank indicated that they see no issues with extending our maturity on the interim note to next April, okay? And they're memorializing that for us now, just so we have coverage. I'm on page 5, goals and objectives. So we wanted to break this down into pieces that we can call it manage and convey better. So our near-term goals and objectives, including this presentation, are to give you all the perspective you need on the current financial wherewithal, discuss the prioritization and timing of the potential impact of the town's infrastructure needs, and then provide you those key considerations to potentially get implemented in the 26 budget development. Long-term, once we've got the updated financial information for 23-24, and hopefully by then we'll have a full year of 25 under our belt, even though that will be unaudited, there's going to be a period there where we'll at least have good 25, call it more current information, and be able to do finer tuned projections going forward. We've built the pro forma models for y'all. We're projecting these things out. Again, we want to make sure we don't just do sticker shock approach just to get it done. We want to make sure we have a strategic approach to layer these things in, to get you the funding to service that debt. If and when we can, we'll get grant monies or some kind of monies from some resources, principal forgiveness even on the state revolving fund loans, which is the same as cash in pocket as far as I'm concerned on this stuff. If it's not money out of your pocket, it's money saved. So we're working through that. We do want to, at some point, it'll be probably after we get through that very detailed analysis update where we have more financial information, where we can set some really good benchmarks, be fine-tuned about where we want to get to for our financial policy guidelines, which help ensure the longevity and financial position of the town. Whether it's the same council 5 years from now or not, those financial policies live in place to provide the guidelines so that, you know, one person comes on and says, well, I don't want to do this anymore. The rest of y'all have to agree that that's a bad idea, right? Or same with staff. They get here, they have to abide by these financial policy guidelines. and I will make a little quick note, which I address here in a minute, but when we set policies, there's two schools of thought. Here are the numbers, we're going to live by them, et cetera. There's also the aspirational targets, and that's what I'm going to talk about tonight, is that we're not there yet. I can tell you that. That's a spoiler alert. You're not going to see anywhere in here where we're hitting the benchmarks that we think we should set up for at least best practice purposes. But we will set benchmarks, call them aspirational targets, so that we can work to get there. And one thing I heard, I lost his name now, but he was up here talking, and he hit on a very good point, and it's one thing that we typically like to include in our analyses, and that's what we call the repair and replacement fund. So not only are you addressing your CIP and laying that out strategically and prioritizing, but you build into your budget a certain amount of money, whatever it is. You usually try to key in off of depreciation, because that's if you're funding that depreciation along the way while one asset is getting older, at some point you're going to have to replace it. That depreciation, even though it's an accounting number, it's helpful to ballpark what you're going to need to set aside over the years to be able to replace that. Okay. So we'll work on that, but that will be some time from now until we can get a real good handle and detailed review of the numbers. After that, we'll create an actionable strategic plan of finance that layers in all the CIP that you'll have for the next 5 or beyond years, and then assist y'all. We don't just hand that, okay, good luck with it, and it sits on a shelf and collects dust. We want to make sure we're involved in helping to shepherd and execute that strategic plan so nothing gets missed. And over time, anyway, things are going to evolve. Things are going to need to be tweaked in the plan, but at least you have something that you can follow, work with, and get it done over the desired time frame. Page 6. This starts our order of magnitude review. Okay, so we made some observations on the operations of your general fund. And so generally speaking, your general property tax revenues aren't a material portion of your budget. And that includes, it's about $200,000 all in for your general property tax revenues. That's only 14% of your budget. If you do a quick drill down, the biggest piece of that is real property tax revenues, and they're only about 11% of your overall revenue budget. So you can't necessarily have something go by or have a need and quickly raise the real property tax if you need to generate a bunch of dollars. Okay, it's not as material as the next line, which says the bank stock, the franchise fee, plus the meals tax. Each of those on average are about $400,000 a year. You know, that's 50%. Those two sources alone provide 50% of your budget. And as the note below that says, those revenues may be sensitive to overall economy as well as changes to potential net capital in the bank, right? So if the bank is reporting certain net capitals for this location or multiple banks, but something changes in the way their capital their capital calculations are restricted, which happens from time to time, that could potentially impact the monies you're generating off of those levers. Okay, so we want to start monitoring or start being aware of our different revenue generation levers and know which ones that we can pull and what they're going to provide to us, and maybe change a little bit. I know I sit on the Chesterfield County Healthcare Commission, which is CCRC, Lucy Core. I don't know if y'all are familiar with it. But right now we're going through a process where the federal monies are coming down. They've been coming down the past few years. So we're working to change the mix of our census to be able to change what percentage those levers, each of those generate, to wean ourselves off of relying on that. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Mr. Taylor, what do we bring in cigarette taxes?
That's pretty minimal. I don't have it at fingertips, but what?
Varies a bit, but we've only had one full year of collection, somewhere between $45,000 and $50,000. It's minimal.
Okay, well, it helps.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Well, real estate is about 170 on average, right? So it's about a third. Cigarettes about a third. Okay. Sorry,
Okay.
I wouldn't.
Thank you. I'm sorry to
Oh,
interrupt.
no, you're fine. You're fine. So a material drop in one of those two resources could quickly impact your fiscal health. So we would like to think through some strategic ways to be able to change our, call it, revenue makeup. The town's largest category of operating expenditures obviously is personnel. I don't think that would surprise anybody. And that has been growing at roughly 10+% on average, not linearly, but that if you were to do a linear calculation, that's about what it would be. It's about 10% each year over the past several years. You only have about roughly a half years of reserves on hand at June 30. And I'd like to point out, June 30 is just one point in time. You collect, for example, real property taxes once a year, and you send out the bills with company in November. You start collecting in December, January. So right now, if you look at your bank statement, it's about $2.2 million, or in that neighborhood, 2.2, 2.4. I'm going by memory, so bear with me. But we looked at that the other day because of the sewer failure and trying to figure out, okay, well, we don't have audits, so it's going to be hard to go find a lender that's going to lend us money if they don't have current financials. Even the governmental programs, state programs and federal programs alike are hesitant to lend money if they don't have current financial information. I don't think that'll shock anybody either. What can we do out of pocket right now, right? So if the projects we're talking about right now to fix the sewer are, you'll see in here in a minute, we're using a conservative number, we think, of $750,000. You have the cash in hand right now because you just collected on real estate, for example. So throughout the year, though, when you look at that number in the June 30 audit, that number is going to be somewhat inflated based on collections between, let's say, December and June in that fiscal year. So it gets reported, but you don't have that $2 million or $1 million, whatever it is, at the end of the year for the remaining 6 months until you collect revenues again. Okay, so that, while it's a helpful number to have in your audit to measure, etc., it's not necessarily always available. That's my point I'm trying to get across. But right now, I think that's our, call it, emergency approach. Although it's not preferred, that's sort of where we're thinking that money may have to come from for the immediate purpose.
Would it be advantageous for us to split our taxes up the way the county does biannually?
Collecting December, June?
To help with our budgeting, the process of our budgeting?
So that's a great question. And I would say, if you, in the year you decide to do that, right, you're going to have a windfall. And knowing what to do with that windfall and setting it aside either in a cookie jar or creating the policy that maintains a certain level of fund balance, that could be very, very helpful. Okay. I don't know how much additional staff time. So you got to think about if you do something to generate revenues or more, help your cash flows, there's usually a cost tied to that. And I think there's going to be additional billing costs, just like on the utility system. If some places go quarterly, some are by every 2 months. Others have moved to singular month because they want to be able to bill and get those cash flows on a regular basis. But there are costs associated with staff's time to send out, basically duplicating the billing process if you only do it once a year. So just again, but that's a great question. Okay. I think we have some other notes in here that I think you're going to sort of tie in. The last bullet on this page is right now on your tax supported side, the governmental, the general fund, you don't have any debt. Okay, so that's a positive, right? No debt service there. Key considerations on the general fund operations. So as reflected in this chart on this page, you'll see line 3, which is operating revenues minus your operating expenditures, excluding capital. You can see that that is sometimes positive, sometimes negative. That's the first observation. The other observation we would make is that it's starting to thin. When you do have a surplus, that number is getting a little bit smaller each year. Okay, so we would quantify that, or qualify that as somewhat of a budget imbalance, right? You've got to have enough revenues on a regular basis to create surpluses at a minimum to cover your other non-operating stuff. repairs, replacement, new capital projects, et cetera. So if you're running thin on operations as it is, then you're not gonna have a lot left over on these projects that you really need to get done. And avoid the Band-Aid expenses that y'all are feeling the pains of it, as Mr. Stork said earlier, you know, taking our pill now, I think that's how you put it. I think that's a great way to qualify it, is you gotta make some important decisions, and starting with this 26 budget that might feel like medicine or feel like a shot in the arm, but it's obviously over the past 5 years or so, I mean, things have been deferred, including upping the revenue sources that go toward paying the ever increasing operations. So with that said, y'all have squirreled away some dollars, but again, that's only a measure, and your budget is not huge. So even though it looks like a lot of money as a dollar amount at the end of the fiscal year, June 30, it also might, as a percentage of your budget, also look like you got a lot, relatively speaking. However, if you flip to the next page, which is page 8, I'd like to focus in on the top chart. And in this particular case, we're just showing you 22. Again, we don't know what fund balance and cash are two different things. They're not always tied at the hip. So we wanted to give you an accurate number of what you looked like at the end of 22 that we have the audit for. And there's roughly only $600 of available monies to you all, the unassigned fund balance. That's your rainy day monies. That's your most flexible pot of money. If you have to go out and fix a sewer line, that's where you pull from. Okay. Unless you have a separate cookie jar set aside for capital projects. So what we would like to discuss, or for you to consider, this is food for thought. Again, take it home, digest it, and obviously we will be back at some point to talk through more details. But right now we should be thinking of trying to set an aspirational target of $2 million. Okay, it's a little over, call it 1 year's worth of revenues right now, but we know we're going to have to grow our revenues. So we're just starting right in the neighborhood of $2 million. Okay, that would be a two-prong approach. That's the first prong. We want to have the greater of $2 million, flat number, easy to track, or 365 days of cash on hand. So the way we think of it is you've got monthly expenditures, and they're your monthly burn rate, as some people refer to it. You're going to have expenditures across the entirety, the whole 12 months of a fiscal year. And if things just went to hell in a handbasket, you know you've got 1 year's worth of operations in pocket, and you can address any downturns, economically, pandemics, whatever it is, surprise expenditures out in the streets. 1 year's worth or 365 days worth of cash on hand should be an aspirational target. And then commencing with the 26 budget, in order to get there, we have to have some type of revenue sources. So implementing incrementally new revenue sources to mitigate rising pressure on those operating expenditures, potential future reductions in other local taxes, the surprise event where, you know, the bank or the meals tax starts to fall off, which provides us with, and I forgot to mention that I think that's where, over the past couple of years, those have been doing so well. I think maybe we've thought, okay, well, we're in good shape because we're still getting some surpluses in some years. I think the growth in those two resources has sort of offset some of the need and hidden it, for lack of a better way, from plain sight, if that makes sense. Yes, ma'am.
If the economy continues to strain people's budgets, they tend to not eat out as much, which affects
That's
our
right.
meals tax.
Yep.
So
You got it. And then lastly, just to point out, I think India can correct me if I'm wrong too, but that little pop you see in the fund balance at the end of 22, I'm sorry, you okay? Oh, okay. That pop you see in your percentage of unassigned fund balance as a percentage of your expenditures or your budgets, however you want to look at it, you had a nice pop at 22, but that's a little bit of a anomaly because there was some ARPA dollars recognized in that year Of course, you receive funds, you recognize the revenues and the expenditures when you go to spend those. So that pop there is just the recognition of those ARPA dollars. It's not from where we were able to squirrel more money away that particular year. So I want to be clear on that. All right. Now on to the water and sewer funds. I'll stop there. Any questions so far on the general fund stuff that I just reviewed? Okay. Doesn't mean you don't get an opportunity to ask questions at the end. I just want to make sure I'm not skimming too quickly. All right. Town's operating revenues have been inconsistent. They've sort of sawtoothed over the past several years. And I think that has some to do with maybe availability and connection fees, maybe where you have little periods of construction going on, people or developers paying some availability or connection fees, et cetera. I don't know necessarily that it's tied to your user fees, but it just from our outside looking at it, and it appears to us that it's been very inconsistent. And on the water and sewer system, you should be able to sort of project out within a relative range how those revenues are going to look over the years. It just doesn't look like that to us. So that's something we want to do a little bit more digging on, especially when we have more current audited information. However, what has been consistent are the operating expenses that have been growing faster than your revenue growth. So again, these numbers that we're showing you in the percentage of growth, these are what we call the compounded average annual growth. It's a linear, basically a linear calculation to say if you start in 2018 and I was to grow on a linear basis what my revenues are or my expenditures are, those are the percentages that we call the growth rate. But again, revenues have been going up and down, not at 7%. The operating expenses have been going a little bit more consistent, not exactly 12%, but on average, if you were to look through the numbers, it'd be about 12%. So you've got a structural imbalance there as well, or at least that's an indication at some point those two lines are going to cross, and then you're really going to be in a structural imbalance. On a combined basis, the water and sewer fund reserves are fairly modest at 1.2 million, given the size of the budget and the needs that y'all have coming up. Similar look here for your key considerations. Again, we try to set these pages up so they're easy to follow, even though, so this should look very similar to the general fund side. And again, here, so it's easier to follow, especially if y'all take it home tonight and have trouble sleeping and you want to read through it in detail. But operating revenues have been choppy on the utility system, while operating expenses have continued to increase fairly consistently. And again, if you look at it on a linear basis, about 12% per year. And for the purposes of the 26 budget itself, okay, the town may want to consider raising rates just to catch up that 7% versus 12%, just to catch up and close the gap on your revenues versus your operating expenditures, okay? That's a ballpark range for now. Again, we want more current information to be able to opine on a specific levelized strategic approach, but somewhere where we can at least start in 26 with some element of new revenue generation, that's what we need to be considering for the 26 budget, okay? And based on our 30,000 foot projections, the 10 to 20% range for operations by itself should set you up on the right path, okay? Said another way, I wouldn't want to wait till 27 because you already know you got stuff to cover. You already see that your operating expenses are growing. All right, so let's talk a little bit about your capital needs. And this is not your full CIP, but just isolating these three big projects that we know two are very much priority. We've got the recent sewer system failure that happened in February 2025. Rough estimated cost right now, conservatively, we think maybe $750,000. The annual debt service, if you just do simple math, plain vanilla approach, obviously, as we get more refined and clearer guidance, maybe there's something we can do more strategically. I will say if we try to go, call it the less expensive approach, meaning try to go get a below market rate through the state revolving fund loan programs or some federal program, we're not going to be able to, we don't have a lot of flexibility to structure that debt. Okay. If we go out and issue debt on our own, whether it's through the banks or maybe we could do VRA because they're flexible with utility projects and how we structure. We've done a lot of structuring financings for them. Or maybe we just have to do something on our own. Either way, we have more flexibility in that type of program versus the state revolving fund program for either VDH's drinking water or DEQ's clean water. Yes, ma'am.
Are we offered any type of special interest rate?
Yes, ma'am. That's what we, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. Below market, that's what I was referring to.
Thank you.
So if right now in the market 20-year debt is 4%, they might be able to get it to you for 3.5%, for example. Those aren't real numbers. I'm pulling them out of the air for perspective. But yeah, and that ultimately, you're trying to keep your costs down. That includes the financing, but in some cases, maybe it's more palatable over time. Like I said earlier, instead of going right to sticker shock, maybe there's a way between using our resources to defray some of the early years of debt service and bringing these on. Maybe there's a way to levelize those rate increases. The consent order water projects, which I guess we got the consent order in August of 24. That's about $7 million. I think rough estimate again, right now, that's what we're working with. Annual debt service on that, again, plain vanilla mortgage style would be $450,000 a year. Remember your operating surplus was last year or the year before? 2023, we were showing like $70,000. Last year was negative, and we've got to add 50, 450, and then on that original project 5+ years ago, we were capped at 7.2. The debt service on that alone is 475. So all totaled, I'm just round numbers here, about $1 million worth of debt service if we didn't come out of pocket any on our own and we finance it all, which that's not a recommendation. It's just plain vanilla for order of magnitude. Somehow you're going to come out of pocket for something, right? You're not going to come all out of pocket for the total projects of $15 million. I'm pretty certain of that. But we have to figure out a way to start making progress to be able to anticipate and fund about $1 million worth of debt service in the next 3 or so years. We can do all the structuring we can. That just gets more costly. So I just want to point that out. So if you just do the simple math and take that $975,000 a year of annual debt service that we're going to have to absorb one way or another, unless we get the grants, the principal forgiveness, any other monies to buy that down, that's roughly 100% of your current revenues on the water and wastewater side. Okay, so I'm not saying you have to raise your rates 100%, doubling your rates to get there. You're going to see on the next page what we would think a good, at least first, biting the elephant, one piece at a time, or eating the elephant one piece at a time approach. So going to that page 12, here are our key considerations to offer up to y'all as you think through and start working through the 26 budget development. The imbalance in the revenue versus operating expenses growth, trying to get your revenues to be more consistent to better project and budget on. We would probably recommend at least starting with the range to get the operation side more balanced in the 26 budget with a 10 to 20% range. Again, trying to be consistent with the general fund, etc. We think that would be the right range to consider. For capital, obviously that's a bigger hurdle, and so where we would probably start or recommend or for your consideration is trying to add on to the 10 or 20 another 20 to 30. So that is, we're speaking to them individually here because we want you to recognize that operationally we need to get balanced, and we also got to provide resources for the capital programming So when you add those together, you're talking about in the 30 to 50% range. I just want to be clear. They're not, sorry, go ahead.
No.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have other jurisdictions and their rates for water and sewer that we can kind of look at where we are compared to other jurisdictions in the Commonwealth? Or
Yeah.
do you already know where we are?
Well, we purposely did not include that in tonight's discussion, and here's the
Okay.
reason why. We can throw peer comps out all day long, but at the end of the day, this is one of those times we like to stand back and look at everybody and see where we compare, to see what makes sense competitively speaking, right? Because somebody living here might pick up and move if our rates and fees are too high. But things have been deferred for so long and not kept up with, call it the growth in operating expenditures or the capital. It's sort of a moot discussion for now. We are planning at some point when we do have future presentations and analytical work to show you where we are. But for tonight's discussion, we purposely left all that, call it superfluous information at this point out. But no, that's a great question, and we typically do stack that up. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. You go ahead. You go ahead.
Typically, most local governments will do rate studies every 2-3 years, and that would be something that would be included in a rate study in comparison, comparing you to other municipalities and localities.
And India can correct me if I'm wrong, but right now you charge, call it mostly a flat fee, right? I know you got meters and stuff now, but you basically just do the flat fee, right? Yeah. Oh, it is based on usage. Okay. Well, the other thing we talked about and I mentioned up above it is base fee. Usually you have your usage, and your usage, it makes sense, right? Intuitively, you think if I'm charging a user fee, I'm putting the cost of providing the water or the sewer service to the folks, and they're paying for the usage of the system. Well, the same folks that are enjoying the benefits of the system also need to, as I said earlier, participate in the maintenance of it and potential future replacement of it, right? You can't just use a vehicle and not do the maintenance on it. So there's a cost associated. I'd equate it to putting gas in your car is the user fee, right? I'm using it, so I fill it up every once in a while. I keep driving, but I got to take it to the mechanic periodically and make sure it's all the systems and gears and stuff are still turning, right? So it's something to be worked out. And again, as India said, we work with feasibility consultants and rating consultants all the time, and there's going to be a point in time where they need to be pulled in to help us figure out, okay, what is the equitable structure for the buckets that you charge with, okay? Reserves, similar, and I hit on this a little bit ago, similar to the general fund, we would like to set an aspirational target to get our days cash on hand up, as well as $2 million, taking that two-pronged approach again, having the greater of. And then lastly, you do have some debt on your utility side, and you're currently paying on it. And we're not hitting, if I can go back a slide or two, on our debt service coverage, which is the green line. I'm on page 10 for those following along in the book, bottom right-hand corner. Line 6 is your debt service coverage ratio, and we're bouncing around negative, positive, over $1, under $1. The upshot is when you go to a lender to borrow funds, at a minimum for, let's say it's a federal program like USDA, they're going to want to see that you're sum sufficient, which is another way of saying if you take operating revenues, back out operating expenses, you have at least $1 remaining to pay $1 debt service. That would be 1 times coverage or sum sufficient. Going back to page 12, where we would like to be, where most folks try to be at a minimum, is 125, because that's the criteria that a lot of lenders will set. They want you to have $1.25 for every dollar of debt service. VRA, they only require $1.15. But since we're not at either of those really on a consistent basis right now, we want to set it at least as an aspirational target, and maybe once we get to further down the road, maybe we can talk about upping that for better management, because this would not factor in that repair and replacement fund. We've got zeros in the repair and replacement fund for right now. All we're worried about or focused on are those 3 big projects. Okay. And I promise we're wrapping up here shortly. This was a page 13, just to give you a concept of how we calculate those ratios for liquidity and debt service coverage, but also just a quick illustration to show that there's just inconsistent performance is where I would like to qualify that and leave it. We want to make sure the town has, call it, more consistent numbers as we plan going forward. So lastly, just to wrap up, page 14, next steps. I think I've hit on this. This is the dead horse I'm beating tonight, I guess. We do want to obtain and analyze more current financial performance and results. We do want to come back to you with an updated analysis on the general fund and utility pro forma in order to evaluate, call it fine tune what those rates and fees should project by for both general fund and utility funds. Doing a deeper dive in which levers it makes sense to pull on the general fund in particular. Continue to assess your future debt capacity, debt affordability. Just a quick note on those 2 things, because some folks might look at them as the same thing. They're not. They're very different. A locality or a utility system can be in good shape from, they can take on the debt. A creditor will look at them and say, well, you can take on as much debt as you want. At the end of the day, affordability is how do we pay for that debt? And so we're trying, we need more information, but in a clearer idea of what's going on with our projects. But at the end of the day, you can bring on all the debt you want, but if you can't pay for it, it's not affordable. So we want to make sure we get to that point when we do the updated analysis. Then we want to determine and revisit the appropriate levels for benchmarking those financial policy ratios. Identify current and potential future resources that could be made available for the town CIP. And then coordinate with staff and potential lenders regarding both short-term and long-term funding options. And in particular, right now, we're looking at that interim note like it's due in April, because a year is going to roll by fast, and we're going to have a plan in place to pay back that. We got it. It's up to $5 million or somewhere in that range, but we've already drawn down $1.5 million of it, and we're paying interest on it. So we've got to figure out a way. Are we going to pay off 1.5 out of pocket, or are we going to have to fund that on a long-term basis? If so, what else can we do it so we do minimize your financing costs for doing multiple series of debt? Okay. I've spoken a lot this evening, so I'll shut up and y'all can peg me with questions if you want.
Are there any questions from council? I've asked mine all along. How about staff? Miss India, do you have any questions of Mr.? Okay. Thank you so much for presenting
Thank
this
y'all
to
for
us.
having me this evening, and thank you for the opportunity to work with y'all. I think long term, just we're gonna get there. Need to, yep, that's right. Thank
We
you.
appreciate your guidance and your help. Thank you. Okay. We're going to move on to our second public comment. If there's anyone out there who would like to come speak, please say your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to speak. I now open public comment. Going once, going twice. I now close public comment. I would like to move on to the second member comment period. Are there any of you that have, Ms. Davis, do you have any? Mr. Voigt? Mr. Webb? Coyle? All right, we will close the member comment. I need a motion to move us into closed session at this time.
Suppose I
Mr.
could read
Voigt?
it. I move to go into closed session pursuant to code dash 2.2-3711A1 for discussion of performance of specific public officers to complete the performance evaluation of the town manager.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Councilman Voigt, a second by Councilman Hageman, and is there any discussion? Please raise your hand if all in favor say aye. Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. We will now move to closed session. Okay, we are now out of closed session. I have one,
Want me to state the certification?
yes.
Next step. So we need a motion to certify that the only items discussed were those identified in the motion to be closed session pursuant to Virginia Freedom of Information Act. Need a motion with roll call vote.
I make the motion.
I have a motion from Mr. Webb,
Second.
second from Mr. Stork. And I am going to take is there any discussion first? Okay. Ms. Davis,
I certify.
Mr. Voigt, Mr.
I
Webb,
certify.
I certify. I certify.
all members have certified. Thank you. Before I ask for a motion to adjourn, I have 4 council members that have not caught up on their certified COIA training. And the town attorney told me this has to be done every 2 years. And it can be done through the Virginia Ethics and COIA Advisory Council, and it has an online.
They have to get it. I can train you with FOIA, but I can't train you. I mean, I can, but it doesn't count. It doesn't check the statutory.
Those of us that went to the Virginia Municipal League for new people, we received our FOIA training, and they were very adamant that it was every 2 years. So I know you did not go to that. And then I had 3 other council people that needed to have that.
It's the Conflict of Interest Act training. So I could send a link to India, but it's just the Virginia Ethics and Conflict of Interest Advisory Council. Yes, they have it on. I've never done it, but it's an online training.
Okay, Ms. Davis does not have internet. She does not have a cell phone. She's like me. She's a Luddite. How would she take her?
Maybe in the office here.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
You'll, okay.
I mean, yeah, don't let him measure. Yeah.
Be seen and not viewed. Okay. May,
And then sorry. So FOIA is every 2 years too. And we do that, our firm. So I that one out. So if any of you participated, I'll send it out to Mark. We do webinars every summer. We do 2 sessions.
you already did.
Oh, I did it here in person. Okay.
Last summer.
So check that.
And then the rest of us that went to the VML, we
Yeah.
also got our FOIA training.
From Daniel.
Yeah.
Okay. At our firm. Which counts for you because she is the town attorney like me. But under the statute, that training has to be from your governing body's attorney. So most people in that room didn't count, but they don't know that.
Oh,
We
okay.
told the amount, but they seem to
Not care.
But it
Okay,
counted for you because our
Good.
firm represents you. So,
good.
but for COIA, for some reason, we train on COIA, and I think I may have done something.
Yes, but they said it wasn't a certified training.
But it doesn't count.
didn't
under the
count.
statute, so for whatever reason.
Right, so that,
'Cause
yes,
it was not for COIA. Public of Interest Act.
yes, it did. We got a certificate.
Yeah, but who gave that? Not Daniel. Well, he's the guy from the.
It wasn't your firm.
No, so that's because that was the director of the Conflict of Interest Advisory Council. Yeah, that's why.
So, I guess you all know who you are that need it. If you don't, India knows. I would like at this time to ask for a motion to adjourn. There's no further business before this council. So move. I have a motion from Councilwoman Davis and a second from Councilman Voigt. Is there any discussion? All in favor, raise your hands. Motion carries. Meeting adjourned.